Good evening and welcome. It's been a little bit that we haven't met here in the library, and I'm very pleased that we're doing so for such a special program in which we'll talk about books, and specifically books published in Italy, Jewish books published in Italy, and what I would say the most amazing enterprise, and I'm not saying it lightly. This is an extremely small publishing house that over the course of 3-4 decades really encompassed the history of Judaism and gave to the Italian public at large a sense of the debates, the culture, the trends, the historiography, the literature in the diaspora in Israel, as well as a tremendous contribution to Jewish life in terms of religious books, spanning from the Torah Haftarot that are used at the temple, and to the Talmud, which is the latest Italian bestseller. And nobody would guess that the bestseller would be the Treaty of Rosh Hashanah. So I'm very pleased today to introduce to you Shulim Vogelman, who is the director of the Giuntina publishing house and the son of its founder, Daniel Vogelman, with whom we have had also a long relationship during the history of our center. Shulim received a degree in history from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and went on to become the director of the Giuntina. Vogelman initiated a new series of Israeli literature called Israeliana that stands there very prominently next to a few other series, one called Diaspora and others that concern various aspects of Jewish history, and then an enormous population of books called Fuoricollana that by now, and I think very interestingly, represent almost the majority of the output of the publishing house. For 10 years, he curated the International Festival of Jewish Literature in Rome, and in 2004 he published his own novel, entitled Mentre la città bruciava, while the city burned. He also translated from the Hebrew about 15 Israeli novels, and I think Italians are very grateful for that in particular, because he published some of the most wonderful writers of our times. Before we start the conversation with Shulim about what it means today to be a publisher of Jewish books in Italy, I would like to say a few things that probably you all know that we share, but just to give create a map of where 5 centuries after the printed book was born, this enterprise stands. As we know, Italy is the homeland of the Hebrew printed book. The first one having appeared in Rome in the middle of the 1400s. Reggio Calabria, but there is an earlier... Rome before Reggio Calabria. The first one is in Rome, and it's fantastic, it's at the Palatina, it's a small Sidur that is at the Palatina. And it's quite, an early version of printing that is quite fascinating. And we have here Michelle Chesner from Columbia University, who might tell us a little more about that. So in the first stage of this new adventure, the printing of Hebrew books flourished mostly in the north, Venice, Mantova, Ferrara, and was shaped by the politics of the time. as most of you know, soon after the first Hebrew books began to appear, governments, beginning with the government of the Serenissima, the Venetian Republic, limited the ownership of Hebrew printing presses to Christians. And these Christian printers clearly must have seen an opportunity, a business opportunity in printing Jewish books, so Hebrew books. And they needed Jewish labor because they couldn't do the work themselves. And here is one of the first examples that is vastly studied. There is a very vast literature on this laboratory of coexistence, of exchange, of clashes that is represented by this first stage of Hebrew book production in Italy. Now, this was not an uneventful story because book is a powerful tool. I mean, imagine a world where you have 1, 2 copies, 3 copies of something. One is in one side of the planet, the other one is the other side of the globe. People don't get too excited about those and what these single copies might contain, although they did that too. But the possibility to replicate and circulate knowledge, particularly religious and also grammars, because the teaching of language at the time was not a simple and straight fact that it might be today, made the already complicated relationship between the Jewish minority and the society at large more visible and precise. The burning of the Talmud in Venice in 1553 was famously a consequence of a controversy between 2 Christian publishers, of which Jews paid dramatic price, for which the Jews paid a dramatic price. And this is one side of this map. The other side is that printing, the Hebrew printing, profoundly changed the Jewish world in 2 directions that are somewhat at odds with one another, I would say. So one side, nourishing knowledge and circulation among the small communities and their extended realities, clearly represented a tremendous opportunity for the Jewish world. On the other hand, if we consider what Joseph Aour calls the horizontal landscape structure of Judaism, of a culture that had developed for centuries horizontally without central authority, printing a book represented one of the modern moments in which authority had to be decided and centralized. And so a shift toward the first vertical modern hierarchy in Judaism. And this was a very dramatic moment in the Jewish world and changed profoundly the self-perception, self-censorship, the way Jews talk to one another and the way they talk, in which they talk to the others. And so when a book needs to be printed, we need to decide which manuscript counts more than the other, which rabbi counts more than the other, which community dictates what is the canon. And from there on, I think that this triple relation continued in different ways and still plays a role today. What books mean for Jews among themselves and what books mean for Jews in their relationship with the majority, because no matter what, in our extremely, when our equal and diverse societies, we talk minority to majority, and I don't think, this is my personal opinion, there is no way we can escape that. Equality is not an overcoming of this relationship, and it's a good, it's a positive fact also. So these are what, the few things I wanted to say. in Italy in particular, from that time on, I like to just point to another moment of Jewish publishing that is very meaningful, and is when after the emancipation, many Jewish families and Jewish entrepreneurs entered publishing as a form of civic participation, of civic presence. A very large majority of the Jewish publishers that produce textbooks between the unification of Italy and 1930 are from the Jewish world. And I think that there is a precise conscience there of wanting to shape a place, and you have to think that Italy was born as, quote, against the church, was a country, unlike all the other nations that were unified around the national church. Italy was born as a completely secular state. So for that very short 50 years, less than 50 years, that go from the unification to the rise of fascism, Italian Jews lived something that I don't think existed in any other country before or after. And it was a very unique situation to be in a completely non-religious reality, at least from the political and legal point of view. This said, I want to say we just fast forward a few decades. We are in 1980, and the Giuntina is founded. I'll say a few things before I'll pass you completely the microphone. I just want to read some names so that you have a sense of the span of this small publishing house in Florence that basically embraces, that creates a sort of a palincesto of Jewish history and Jewish literature and philosophy, and is really something that in other places was the work of 10 publishing houses. So I'm going Elie Wiesel, some of the Italian Holocaust survivors, Liliana Millo, Giuliana Tedeschi, Luciana Nissim, Aleph Bet Yeshua, George Moss, Jacob Neusner, Shmuel Agnon, Chaim Bialik, Viktor Frankl, Irene Nemirovsky, Joseph Soloveitchik, Yeshua Leibovitz, Leo Beck, André Neher, Gershon Scholem, Avram Sutzkever, who even here in the state was published in very spare, and Martin Buber, Franz Rosenzweig, Amin Seinstals, Aaron Appelfeld, Yosef Yerushalmi, Shemuel Trigano, Anna Arendt, Jonathan Sachs, Henrik Heine, Paul Celan, Lizzie Doron, Yoram Kanyuk. And these are only a very, very small percentage. We are talking about a span that is truly impressive. Plus, two important journals, academic journals, Zachor and Materia Giudaica, and as well as I said, the Torah and Haftarot, the Nebuchim, the prophets, the Agadah, books for communal life that are very important, and the Talmud, the first Italian translation of the Talmud. And now La Giuntina doesn't have an easy history, or is an obvious history. It's a very interesting and complicated, and as well as dramatic past. And I like to ask Shulim to tell us a little bit about the Vogelmann family, which is a family that as interconnected with Italy, with some very important historical events and figure of the Italian Jewish community. And I should welcome Stefano Albertini.
You're all welcome. Thank you
for being with us, and
for Shulim is a welcome back, because he came here to present one of his younger authors.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Stefano, for your kind of hospitality, and Natalia for inviting me. First of all, I want to apologize for my poor English, very basic. We will go through this all together. The publishing house was founded in 1980 by my father. He was working in the center of Florence He went in a bookshop called Feltrinelli, and he found a used copy of the French edition of Night by Elie Wiesel. So he read the book, he understood the value of this book, and he translated it, and then he decided to publish it. He published it in, he printed it in a printing house named Giuntina. This is why a Jewish publishing house has such an Italian name that nothing have to do with Jewish tradition. In order to understand why he picked the Night by Elie Wiesel and why he printed it in Giuntina, I must go back a little bit. About at the end of the First World War, I would start this story in Vienna, in the train station of Vienna, where my grandfather, that was named Shulim like me, my family arrived in Vienna because they were from Galicia and near Tarnopol. So the First World War was, the front of the war was approaching, so they fled to Vienna. There my grandfather decided that he wanted to go to Palestine. So they brought him to the train station. In the family histories, I've been told that his father told him, he was just 16. What shall I tell you? To eat every day with a fork and a knife? Just try to be honest. So he went to Palestine. Of course, he never met again his parents. And he arrived in Jerusalem, where he didn't find the work, of course. It was very hard then. And he didn't desire to be a Zionist and go to work in kibbutz in northern part of Palestine. So after he enlisted in the British Army, but also that was not a great experience for him, so he decided to go back in Germany. But at that time, his brother, named Mordechai Vogelmann, that has been the chief rabbi of Katowice and later of Kiryat Motzkin in Israel, he was teaching in the Talmudic Academia in Florence, built by Rabbi Margulies at that time. So he said, come in Florence. So he arrived in Florence, and he needed to find a place where to work and not to work on Saturday, on Shabbat. There was this printing house run by another Jewish man called Olshki, was the Giuntina publishing house. So he started to work there. Quite quickly he became the director of the printing house. Then he married with the daughter of the chief rabbi of Turin, coming from a family with many rabbis and Talmud scholars. They looked for a wife, a suited wife. So he married the daughter of the chief rabbi of Turin, and they had a daughter called Sisel. Then the racial laws arrived, and this is something curious because while almost all Jews involved in publishing sold with the racial laws their companies to non-Jews, my grandfather bought it from another Jew that decided to flee in Switzerland. Olshki bought the printing house. Then, while trying to escape in Switzerland, they were arrested at the border, thank you, and they were deported. His wife and child died immediately at arrival in Auschwitz, while he survived. He survived and he came back in Florence. It was very hard. He immediately began to work in the printing house, and then he found the courage to start again a new life. So he married with a widow that had already a son, and then after a few years my father was born in 48, May 48. So my father went through all the experience of the second generation, made of many unsaid things, not understood things, sufferings. And in this search, you know, it's a good book many times when it ends like it starts. In his search, he found this book, Night, and he decided to begin a publishing house. He translated it, he published it, and then he was also lucky because Elie Wiesel was awarded with Nobel Prize for Peace. So this pushed very much his book and also the other books that we continue to publish. And in the first years, actually, my father published almost both just memories, testimonies, and books on second generation. Between them, Aaron Epstein, The Sons of the Shoah, I think this is the name in English also. It's pioneering book on the themes, yeah, on the theme. But slowly the publishing house opened it herself and started to publish books also on other subjects, Jewish subjects, but not just on the memory of the Shoah. Where do I come in? When I was 18, after my high school, I went to Israel. My plan was actually to live in Israel. I made my Aliyah, I studied in Hebrew University. I lived there 6 years. Then many things happened, but if we need to speak what happened regarding the publishing house, what happened is that the printing house was closed. It was near to be closed because of the crisis, because of digital age, you know, hard days for printing houses. And so I felt that I wanted not to continue the work of the publishing house, and I decided to actually buy the publishing house from the society that ran both things, you know. And so actually New Giuntina started in 2008, 10 years ago. And from the beginning, the main thing I actually did was to open our catalog to Israeli literature. And the second main thing that Natalia mentioned is this big project of publishing the Talmud in Italian. So this is very summarized the history of the publishing house.
Thank you, Shulim. Well, I'll ask a few questions. Stefano probably has a few questions, and then we open to your questions that I'm sure are many. But, and I'm talking as a user, as a reader. I mean, although I left Italy shortly after the publishing house was founded, there was very little. I mean, we had Beniamino Carucci who had done amazing work, but there was really very little in terms of Jewish publishing, something that would live across the Jewish and non-Jewish world the way Giuntina does. And tell me a little bit about you. I mean, Giuntina educated Italians about Judaism in all its forms. Really opened up to while taking care of certain, important things in the community, as the way Carucci did, but really opened to non-Jewish readers to make this universe known. How does it feel? How you make your choice? How you look at this history? What you do with this history today? How you speak with your public? How much the conscience of having done this and continue to do it is part of your daily work?
Well, many questions, not easy to answer. A publisher is a work that stays a little behind the scenes. In fact, sometimes when I think to my work, I think that I am somehow too shy to express myself, so I let others do it for me when I choose what to publish, in a certain way. Our public, it's very wide. It's very, we have many different kind of writers. I could try to to explain it with few examples. For instance, when we have a book fair, this is not actually our main public, but I think it's nice to know. It happens often that someone begins to going around in our stand, you know, looking at the books, and 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you know, you buy a book, you don't buy a book, you're interested, you're not interested, but after half an hour you're going around the stand, there is a problem that a psychologist needs to solve, you know. So we already know this kind of people. In fact, when we are at the book fair, we between us who work at the stand, we say we have another case. So these are, for instance, people in Italy. Actually, there are plenty of it that have, or that they just feel that they have some Jewish presence in their past or family, or that they actually have a Jewish grandma or a Jewish relative, old relative. They feel a kind of belonging, you know, but they do not know how to express it. And I can see exactly how our books, by the way, I don't know if you had the chance to see our classic series that has a graphic, very, very simple, with just colored on the margins, just colored of one color, you know, and nothing else. White in the middle with the title. So if you put all our books one near the other on the table, you can see how with all the titles, you know, Jewish titles, Jewish name, you can see like with these people it's like a sort of mirror, you know, a little bit hypnotic. But so this kind of public, for instance, it's one public that we recognize very well. Then there is another kind of public that is a general one, not Jewish. Mainly, I believe 90% of our readers are non-Jewish readers that are just interested, for instance, in books. Of course, like no need to mention a book by Hannah Arendt, you know, it's for everybody. But also books like I don't know if you know a book called LTI by Victor Klemperer. Do you know him? He's this is an interesting case of our catalog. He was a philologist, and thanks to his wife that was Christian, he could somehow not be deported, but he had to work for the Nazis anyway in a fabric, and he took notes every time he felt that the language was manipulated by the Nazis. He was hearing his colleagues, university colleagues, his friends, Jewish and non-Jews. Every time he was writing down the example, and nearby writing LTI, it means Lingua Terzi Imperi in Latin, that is the language of the Third Reich, that he calls it the language that thinks and speaks for you. Why? And this is a book that explains in a wonderful way how when you speak about language, it's not about culture, it's not about intelligence. Drop by drop, the language gets inside of you. You don't pay attention, but suddenly you begin to use it, and in the moment you begin to use it, you begin to think in the way the people who manipulate it want you to think. And this book, for instance, it's extremely modern, you know. In Italy, I know that exists in English, you can look for it. In Italy, many intellectuals took this book and wrote other books on the same subject, but on the Italian period during the Berlusconi era. It was an era, I think, very long. And by the way, also here in America, I believe that if you read it, you can find some patterns. Yes. Okay, so like a book like this that comes from a Jewish publishing house, but it speaks to very wide society, you know. And when we choose a book, we begin from something Jewish somehow, but we always hope and try to publish book that will arrive to all the public, enrich all the public, and will contribute to the dialogue within society, the political dialogue, or even within society. So LTI, for instance, we sold about 10,000 copies, but it's a long seller that every year it makes 600, 700 copies. That for Italy, it's really good numbers, you know. You must think that in Italy, every year we have in the market 65,000 new books every year, and without mentioning the plague of the self-publishing, that it's a terrible thing. You know, I'm looking here, the last book we published by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, the little book called The Soul, very, 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 very interesting. We published a beautiful book, I believe to be one of the most important books of Jewish thought, mystical thought, that is the 13 Petal-Edged Rose by Adin Steinsaltz. It's an introduction to the Jewish mystics, okay?
It's up behind you, right on top of the list there.
Yeah, exactly. So if you go on Amazon and you go to see mystics or Kabbalah, the poor Rabbi Steinsaltz, like a giant of the generation, stands near a completely unknown, even non-Jewish person that wrote Kabbalah and becoming rich, or Kabbalah and becoming thinner, Kabbalah and become anything. Yes, exactly, you know. These are self-published books, and it's somehow funny, but the truth is that we have to deal with the market where a book from Steinsaltz have the same chance online with a book by anybody who knows what he is and what he wrote, you know, that sells his book at €1, for instance. That was a commercial. So other kind of publics, of course, for the novels, Israeli novels, any kind, you know. Many times people don't even understand that we are a Jewish publishing house, and this makes us happy because it means that we succeed in being universal enough, you know. I will tell you a little story that happened not long ago. So we have a quite lively social community on Facebook, and Facebook, you know, it's like hell. It's terrible. It's like people don't even read, you know. They just are the comment mainly. So we receive many requests for publishing books by people who want to publish books. So on Facebook, on email, there is no problem. We have an answer. We make copy and paste. We just write, thank you very much. Just note that we are specialized in Jewish subjects. You can send your book anyway. We know already that they didn't read that we are specialized in Jewish subjects. So we make copy and paste, and everything is okay. And this, I think, it's one of the best thing we do for the Jewish people in Italy, because we are the only one who answer to people, you know. So they are very grateful, you know. Because for someone who wants to publish a book, just to have an answer from a publisher, it's already a great achievement, you know. And apparently nobody answered, so we answer to everybody in order to, you know, we don't want complaints. And anyhow, before I came here, someone called by phone, the publishing house. So they passed me. I thought, hello, yes, I would like to publish my novel. Okay, I said, okay. Just before you tell me about it, I want to point out that, you know, we are specialized in Jewish subjects. So there is a moment of silence, and you can feel his brain running fast, in order to find the way for publishing. And then he says, well, actually there is a Jewish uncle. You know? So I believe that many readers don't even, especially who reads narrative novels, they don't even know that we make Jewish books. And then, you know, for each book you have a different public. Yeah, something very funny. There was now this cycling race in Israel from Italy. Do you hear about it? The famous Giro d'Italia. So there was, of course, some few, not very much, this BDS demonstration against Israel, you know. So I was looking on Facebook about it, a little demonstration. And the very funny thing was that this small group of BDS was giving out one of our books. Yes, that.
Which one?
Well, we could make a 1 million prize for who guess which book. It's almost impossible, but well, 1 million prizes. No, okay, I will tell you. It's Marek Edelman, Uprising of the Ghetto Warsaw. You know. So in this crazy 365 turn of politics, and you know, somehow the Ghetto Warsaw is a symbol for these, of course, very left-wing people, you know. So we publish Israeli novels, but we can even sell to the extreme leftist BDS people. I believe because we never made politics, you know. We always publish literature. We never. It doesn't mean that we are afraid to publish certain books on certain subjects. You know, we published everything. We published a beautiful book by a woman, for instance, that in Israel, an American woman that lost her child and in a terror attack, and she wrote a beautiful book on mourning and Jewish and reaction to mourning and in Jewish tradition, and she lives in a colony. She's a very right wing, but we don't care because the book it's a great book. Her name is Sherry Mandel. Maybe you know her, I don't know. And it's a broken beracha of broken heart, you know. But so we publish anything, but we don't make political statements, you know. We make literature, and this, I think, helped us to keep every kind of public, and actually never happened to me to be attacked for anything, you know, from any side, because I think that people recognize that we do literature. But the most striking thing regarding public is the success of the Talmud, as Natalia was mentioning. That on one side we were very happy, on the other side it was a little bit hard because we printed just 2,000 copies, first print, you know, because we said, okay, Talmud, it's an incredible project, many people work for it, but still, you know, it's something difficult. Jews in Italy, we have 20,000, 25,000 Jews. They are not great readers, by the way. So, and the book came out in 4th April of 2016, if I remember well. On the 5th of April, the 2,000 copies were finished. And we printed more than 10,000 copies, but in 4 rounds, you know, so it's not very economic. No. In any case, I for one whole year, every day, I ask myself, how comes that people want the Talmud in their house? And yet I have not a real answer. But first of all, I think the Talmud is in the general collective imagination. You know, yeah, that was Well, that's a point, you know. I felt from Christian readers a sort of reparation, you know, like people knew it was written in all articles that the Talmud was burned, that was persecuted, there was censorship. So I felt that the Christians wanted to repair and have the book, you know. This, I don't think they will buy the whole 37 tractates, but for the time being, they want at least to have one tractate in their house. I think that was strong because there is a whole part of the Catholic world in Italy that since John Paul II, it's quite close and search for a dialogue with the Jewish world. So this was one kind of public. Then there is the curiosity, you know, and then I believe that people now in the whole world, we are living a period of great uncertainty, and especially in Italy, it's like nothing is clear. Maybe, you know, like we are not able to form a government now, you know, and if we will have a government, it will be a very conservative one and populistic. Anyway, the world is going through difficult times, and I felt that people understood the importance of this big cultural work of this enterprise, and the weight of it, you know, how much meaningful it was, and regardless of what was written inside, they felt that by buying the book, by having the book, they could get a little bit of sense, you know, in a period of lack of sense, you know. But I believe that it will continue to, I will continue to be surprised by, because till today, you know, we receive emails from people, non-Jewish people, that just asks when the next tractate is coming. I can't wait. You know, so you have to breathe deeply and answer, oh, just a little bit of patience. You know, and but actually this project was a huge opening of Jewish culture to Italy, to the Italian public, because, you know, I never really studied the Talmud, you know. I read it for the first time, a whole tractate, when I published it. And in the moment you do, you understand that the Jewish mind is you know, radicated there in that kind of thought, and I think that it was really opening a very big window on Jewish culture. And my feeling is that inside the Jewish community, people are not completely secure with this. You know, they somehow, I think, the Jewish Italian community, of course, feel very happy to have this tool. But at the same time, there is the feeling that we shared something that was very intimate, you know. And there are people who say, no, it should not have been done, you know, such a thing. Yeah, and anyway, this is it's a very difficult project, because we actually just print and distribute the book, you know. But behind it, there is a huge project of the Italian state. We just have the logistic and economical way of printing it. But it's very, very difficult, because we do not know in the future what will be. You know, it's very hard to organize it. But for our publishing house, it was very important to have this work, and so I really work hard to do it. And if I will come back to New York to speak here in a few years, it means that.
We presented the first one when Rassegna was here with Clelia, with Bodega. So probably many of you were at that event, and it is quite impressive.
Yeah. What did you ask? You had other questions?
No, I wanted to ask. Did you have a question? Did you have a question? No. So I think I'd like to open a little bit to questions from the public, and because I'm sure there is a lot
are there universities in Italy that concentrate specifically on coursework in the literature itself?
In the?
And are there is there coursework at universities offering work in
Jewish
studying
studies?
the authors,
Well, very few, actually. There are some courses, but there is at the rabbinical center of Rome, there is a degree that it's organized with the Italian university, but is inside the Jewish community. But really, Jewish studies.
Maybe I want to say a word. So in the charter of the Italian National Public University from 1947, I think, there was an institution of a teaching of Jewish studies. Now, somehow, it never materialized. And it remained, and through my childhood, everybody spoke about this charter and the fact that how could it be done and in which university. So there were a few experiments. One that probably got closer to materializing the institution of a chair was at the Sapienza in the late 70s, between the 79 and 82, 83. And there was a start, there was a talk, there was a negotiation, it never went anywhere, but it resulted in some courses of Jewish philosophy, Jewish history. And then in the following years, some kind of interdisciplinary projects were established in Pisa, in Naples, and in Venice, where professors from different disciplines teach something that has to do with Jewish history, and then they organize it in the promotion so that the students learn that in Pisa there is, I think it was Michele Ruzzati who established the interdepartmental Center for Jewish Studies. So in various like philosophy, history, literature, you have people who teach aspects of Jewish history or culture. But up to this point, that chair that should have been established was planned after the war, never materialized. Although now we have this master course at the Sapienza with Severa Di Nepi, which is another step. We co-sponsored one part of it is a master course in Jewish studies at the University of Rome La Sapienza, but is not part, we don't know if it will exist again next year or in the next semester, but for now it started and we hope it will continue.
Do you publish original works in Italian as well, or is it specifically focused on translations?
Mainly translations, because we have reviews of the Italian Association for the Study of Judaism that publish many articles, but whole books not so many, because there is not much production. We published and we came here to present it, a novel by Italian young author called White Angle, but that is just an exception, It can happen that we have a book of memories, a memoir, but it's just one book. We don't have like Italian Jewish writers so much that write one book after another, that they have do a profession of it. And also, it's like a point of the publishing house is to bring from abroad thinkers and like new books, new ideas that have not been read or listened in Italy, So mainly with translations.
Who are the people who are involved in translating the Talmud?
Well, there are many. There are about 45, 50 translators. Some of them are Italian rabbis, some of them scholars, even young scholars that they not necessarily live in Italy, also in Israel, and I think some also in America. And they actually needed to learn to translate with a specific software that was programmed by the Center of National Research for the publishing of the Talmud. And this software, the name is Traduco, I translate, is helps the translators to work online, and he traces every change to the translation, and he give advices. The software remembers every choice, and so the next time that the same line appears, it automatically gives the best advice how to translate it. So it's something quite unique, and then after the translators they translate, we have editors, about 8 editors that go through the whole translations, and then after the editors, the curator check the work of the editors, and finally the chief rabbi also goes through of Rome, Riccardo Disegni, he goes through the tractate, and then we actually get the a PDF to print, and we then bring it to bookshops.
Did you obtain the support of the Italian government for the Talmud project before making your commitment to go ahead, or did you commit and then hope to get the money?
No, I don't get the money. The money is for the translation, for the project of translating with the software. I get the work done, but then I must invest money to print it and and distribute it and publish it.
But you didn't hire translators until you had the commitment?
No, I don't pay the translator. It's there is a the government through
They
they
pay them.
pay
You
the.
manage it.
No, I just.
Not even that.
No, I'm sorry. I just publish it. Yes.
Sorry. No, I was just curious. Did you also publish a graphic novel of the history of the Jews in Rome, or am I mistaken?
Yes.
That's sort of a departure for you as well.
Well, yeah, that's actually the only graphic novel we published, and it was a unique work from a graphic novelist in Milan. So we decided to publish it, and it's actually quite nice. And it was not existing. Actually, there are not even great books about the history of Jews in Rome, and it had a quite good success. But it's not like something that we commonly do. And
I realize that the Talmud translation is probably just the Talmud itself, not Rashi, not the commentators. But it occurs to me that on the Mishnah we have Rabbi Obadja Bertinoro, and that may be a project, of a native Italian famous, world famous rabbi through the generations. I wonder if that's a project that the Center of National Research would consider funding, to have an authentic Italian translation of his commentary on the Mishnah.
well, yes, it would be very interesting, but
I'm sure I'm not the first to think of it.
Yeah, well, it's I think that if we manage to finish the Talmud, we will have a great party, and then we will start to think to Bertinoro. But of course, I would like to publish many things, and one of the hard things of being a publisher is to say no, because not just to people who have a Jewish uncle maybe in his novel, but also to beautiful projects, you know, because at the end of the day, the publishing house will go on if it works, sells, and have a good economic balance, you know, and so it's many times is I would like to publish books, novels, but sometimes they are too long. Sometimes I feel that they would have not readers, and you know, as I said before, it's a very difficult and turning point for publishing with all the digital era, you know. Actually, I was thinking when you were speaking before, in the ancient time, you could hardly be printed, you know, or you would not be printed, but for sure you would have been read. Today, in modern times, you can very easily be printed, but hardly be read, you know. It's like a paradox, but it's a little bit like this, because the system of publishing, it's a wrong system at its base. Like, you know, you send new books in bookstores, then the bookstores send them back, then you send new ones, and it's a circle of money, you know, and especially big publishers do this in a very big dimension, you know, and it makes the whole market very difficult. So so many times we just need that it's a pity, you know, because sometimes actually what is most important for culture are the book where the publisher do not earn money, you know. It actually happens a lot like this, like the book where that you might sell 40,000 copies of a book that after 5 years you don't find anywhere because everybody throw it away, you know. But you can I don't know, you can print a book or publish the book that you sell 500 copies, but then it goes through ideas, through people, through speaking, through dialogue, it goes on in time, you know. I'm thinking, for instance, of a book that actually sold quite well, but you know, it had quite high costs, but in the end I felt I wanted to publish it. That it's the book, maybe you read it, by Jonathan Sachs, Not in God's Name. Did you read it? Yeah? I mean, I felt that was a book that was giving somehow an answer to what we are living today, that is religious violence, widespread, you know, and we do not have answers very much, you know. If you think about it, you just look at it and live this period, you know, and you don't have answers. And Jonathan Sachs came with a brilliant idea. The core of it is that if we want to read the holy texts in a certain way, the texts allow us to be interpreted in another way, you know. So it comes from us, it must come from us, the initiative to search in these texts ways to escape from religious violence. And then he has these beautiful examples he gives that are all the stories of brothers in the Bible, in Genesis and in Exodus. And he shows how actually the whole story of the brothers are an example of how we proceed toward the higher level of relationships. Because we begin with Cain and Abel. One killed the other one, you know. Then we have Jacob and Esau. They almost kill each other, but then they meet and they make peace. So it's a step forward, you know. Then we have Yosef. And what's here the case? Yosef, we know the story of Yosef, but then when they meet again in Egypt with their brothers, and Yosef wants to keep Binyamin with him, you remember the story, yes? Yehuda tells him, no, take me instead of Benjamin. So Yehuda shows to Yosef that he made this meaningful change in his mind. He understood that, from throwing a brother in a pit, you are ready to put yourself instead of your brother. So it's another step forward. And the last step, it's Moses and Aaron, where finally the two brothers really work together, So I think this is kind of beautiful interpretation. And, it's hard to find a public for this kind of book because it's hard, It's not an easy book. It's a hard book. But I will show you. I felt that it was an important book and it was giving answers. And actually, and this is, I think, something quite incredible, if it works, let's see, yeah. These are all the reviews we succeeded to have in Italy. This is the main Italian daily, La Repubblica. So you can see, this is a big review. Well, I will not show you all the reviews, but just to say that, it's coming from a Jewish publishing house, small publishing house, that it's a very good feeling, of to feel that you are bringing into your society new ideas, ideas of hope and alternatives ideas, and that you feel that you are arriving to a wide public that maybe don't know anything about Jews and Jewish culture.
You have a book there, Il Terzo Tempio. Who wrote it?
Actually, it's a particular book. It's an Israeli writer. His name is Ishai Sarid, and it's a dystopic novel. He images the future of Israel, and there is a war.
It's my topic. It's Pharaoh's temple. Terzo Tempio.
Yes. And so he images that in the future in Israel the third temple is rebuilt, the temple is rebuilt. That is actually a political statement that is existing today. And but then he shows that how this brings to a new destruction, because it's not possible to live in this kind of reality, and but it's yeah.
We have one question here and one there.
So I was interested in the issue you raised, and I want to explore it a little, have you explore it a little further about the dilemmas that a publisher, especially a publisher of books on Jewish subjects, has in an electronic communications age. Of course, that part of the thing that part of what draws intellectuals, Jewish intellectuals, fascination with Jewish culture is its very complexity and multiple characters over a very long period of time, and in very complex different cultures and in different traditions, and in fact in many different languages. So that makes it a subject of profound interest, but one which it's not easy to explore. You need language skills and so on, and historical knowledge and so on. And one of the problems of the modern electronic age is that it creates in many young people a mentality in which they expect information to be kind of instantaneous. If they can pick something up in a Wikipedia article, that's sort of the limit and the maximum of what they can imagine. And so you as a publisher have the problem of trying to get across material that is in a much more complex and challenging format and reflects much more complex and challenging ideas. Does the mentality that the electronic age has created in many young people present a problem for you in terms of reaching the audiences that you're trying with the kind of material you're presenting?
Well, it's one of the main problems. I mean, we have many possibilities. The problem is how to make money of it and how to bring this money inside the company. And that's not easy at all, because what you didn't mention is that people want things immediate and for free, and that's it's a problem. Then the second problem is that some of the contents we publish are not so easy or so simple to synthesize, and if you do it, it's maybe you will not reach the goal you want to reach, and in general Jewish culture it's complex, on the other side, the feeling is also that you are fighting against something bigger than you, not just than me, bigger than any other publishing house in Italy, I believe, and the direction you can take might be not the direction that the huge companies that taking the initiatives on this field will take, so it's hard to think to invest money in technology applied to publishing. In any case, I have the mentality I have, that is a little bit the mentality of the publishing house, a little bit helps us with this, because as I said before, it's hard to say no, but it's also, I think that one of the secrets of the publishing house is that we always knew what our dimension was, what our goals are, and we never took risks, never. This is like one of our main laws. That in publishing it's very important, because with books, that is one of the beautiful things, you cannot know what will work and what will not work. You might believe that this is the best book you ever read, and you sell 300 copies. Then a book that you are not even sure if you want to publish it, 50,000 copies. And so we try to really to keep our path. A little bit like the story of Rabbi Susia. Do you know it? That he used to say, when I will be dead and I will go in front of God, he will not ask me, Rabbi Susia, why you didn't behave like Moses or like Aaron. He will ask me, Rabbi Susia, why you didn't act like Rabbi Susia?
That happens to be my name, Zusia.
Ah, really? You see? So you transmitted me something. And
we have one last question that we're going to take.
Shulim, one of the wonders of La Giuntina is the fact that you publish so many Israeli authors, particularly in fiction, much, much earlier than they would get published, if at all, in the US. And I wouldn't be surprised to find out that in some cases you sell more copies of those that the same authors sell their books in the US. Can you try to explain? Because if you look at Israeli authors, when are they published and translated and where? It turns out that they are very often and most often firstly translated into Italian by Giuntina and by others. Can you try to explain, at least in your opinion, what's going on? Is it some kind of a trend, or why? Because from the big ones, from Aleph Bet Yeshua all the way down, they are translated in English relatively late, don't get much exposure, and quite the opposite is going on in Italy. Minor or new Israeli authors get a lot of exposure. How do you explain that?
Well, I had a meeting with an American publisher, and we just spoke about this, and he said that Israeli authors are too much complex for American readers. And it was somehow strange, because I wouldn't call them complex, but of course, the background is very interesting, you know, very powerful. But let's say that Israeli literature, I think it's in the last years a little bit changed because the wide big distribution arrived also in Israel. So also there they need to produce more and more books. But more or less, I would say that when I receive an Israeli novel, I might like it, I might not like it, but it's very hard to find a stupid book, you know, that you feel that you wasted your time reading it. And it's because in Israel people have interesting stories, interesting backgrounds, and the society it's very energetic. They have actual problems to deal with, and all these kind of things I think give strength to literature. You might not even be a huge writer, you know, but with these tools, instruments, you can write good novels. And in Italy, I must say that the three most famous writers that are Amos Oz, Yoshua, and Grossman opened the way to Israeli literature. And when I began to publish Israeli literature, it was a little bit frustrating because at book fairs, everybody who came to our stand and looked at the books and asked, "Are these Israelis?" Say, "Oh yeah," like a very big expert. "I know, Oz, Yoshua, and Grossman." It's like a trinity, you know. In Italy, we love Trinity, you know. But and always said in this sequence, you know, I never met anybody that said to me Grossman, Yoshua, and Oz. No, Oz, Yoshua, and Grossman, you know. So they really opened the. But so, and the nice thing is that today I heard this less and less, you know. And for instance, we have a few authors that people just come and want the new book of this author. Here in America, we published 2 books, and we will publish also the next ones, of a writer called Ayelet Gundar Goshen. She has at least 1 book in America. The name is Waking Lions. And today she is the Israeli most translated author. And we sold about 10,000 copies of her, These Waking Lions. That was a very great success. And it's very interesting because it's the story of a man, a doctor. So a man used to save lives, you know, very honest. And one night he he hits with his car a man, an Eritrean refugee in the desert. He lives near Beersheba in Israel. And 2 things happen. The first thing is that his wife is a policewoman. And she's the only one who interested in solving this case. All the others are not interested, you know, because it's a refugee. And the other thing is that the wife of this man saw the accident, and she she blackmails this doctor, but not for money. I will not tell you more because otherwise I will ruin your book. Yes. It's very good. It's very good. No, but here it's in English. They buy in English. No, but I have a commitment to readers of all the world, you know. Anyway, it's Waking Lions, and she's a really interesting new voice of Israeli literature.
I'd like to thank Shulim first of all, for his work, for the publishing house, all of you for being here. I hope you will be soon back. I think it's really important to talk about these things and to talk about the long, extended time that it takes to produce and read books, and it's really something very valuable, and you're very thoughtful about these things. So thank you again. Please help yourself. As always, our refreshments are kosher. And I look forward to seeing you again at this point in the fall.
Thank you.
Good.